Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. Today I'm going to present two charts that are used for the United States. The first chart, which I've already spoken about in some of my political videos on the Democrats and the Republicans, is called Sibley Chart. And probably it is the most commonly used chart for the United States. However, I was reading a newsletter by my teacher recently, and she's one of the astrologers that prefer Nick Champion's chart, which actually occurs on July 2nd. And the reason that they use this particular chart, and let me grab it, because I believe it's John Adams had sent a letter to his wife. And that's why they believe that the actual July 4th chart should actually be July 2nd. Because during that time, they didn't have instant, as we do, communications, because we have computers, we have all of the internet and all the things that come with it. But back in that time period, they literally could have had a meeting and not had it be known for a couple days simply because there just was really hardly any way to get the word out. So it is possible. But let me go and grab this just to be sure if that was the person. And I was correct. It is John Adams, and he sent a letter to his wife where he said, and it was July 2nd, that the greatest question was decided, which was debated in America. A resolution was passed without one dissenting colony, that these united colonies are free and independent states. So he actually wrote this to his wife, and it was the second day of July in 1776. Now, interestingly enough, in the Sibley chart, they actually give a time for the chart. I believe it's 5:10. But in the July 2nd chart, which we'll refer to as the Nick Champion chart, has a noon time as its time of event, because they didn't really know what time. And noon is, again, a very common time that would be used in any case where somebody doesn't have a time. And the reason being is that the noon is going to put you right at the midheaven. So it does make a chart that would be compelling and would have a lot of information, because the sun of that moment would be right at the midheaven. It also takes into account the moon, which moves rather quickly. And in that way, they could get somewhat closer to the moon. So we're going to look at these two charts, okay? And with that said, please bear in mind that I'm not going to put a lot of value on the house structure. We're going to talk about it remotely, but I don't want to put a lot of emphasis there. What I really want to do, and I hope I can do this in a timely manner, is I want to look at the sun axis of both charts, the moon axis of both charts. And then I'm going to look at the lunar return in the present day for each chart. And when I ran through this information, and I am really unbiased because I really don't have an opinion one way or another. I know that's strange. Being more of a counseling astrologer in my practice, I don't, other than for study, I don't really do a lot of political charts. I'm only starting to get into that because of this YouTube channel. And with that said, there is a lot of controversy about what chart to use, and then whether or not the house structures will make a difference. Now, according to my teacher and according to my own practice, as a professional, when you return a chart, even if it doesn't have a really great time, you can still get a lot of accuracy out of those returns. So we're going to check on that in a moment. So the very first part of what I want to do is I'm going to take a brief look at both charts. Now, bear in mind they're only 2 days apart. So there's going to be an incredible amount of similarities, which might be one of the reasons why I don't have a very strong opinion. And generally I lean toward the Sibley chart only because that's the chart I tend to use the most often. So what I want to throw out there before I begin this video and before I begin my gratitude moment, I want you as budding astrologers or as astrologers to let me know in the comments what your opinion is after this video. Again, I'm crossing my fingers I can do this in a timely manner. Let me know what you think and what are your arguments in favor of one chart versus another. Okay, so let me fix this up. We're going to go first into the Sibley chart. Then we're going to look at the July 2nd chart. We're going to call it Nick Champion chart, but I actually, because of expediting and pulling all these charts up, it's actually called Sibley as well, but it's not. And I'll make a note of that when we get there. Then what I want to do is I want to put them together in a bi-wheel. And you can see just how close these charts really are. Okay, so what we see here is the July 4th Sibley chart. I was right, 510. I do work with it enough. And this chart has a Sagittarian rising. It has an Aquarian moon. Okay, so again, the rising and the moon are going to be different in the next chart. And the moon is what I'm going to really be looking at, because when you go 2 days forward, the moon is actually in Capricorn. So we do have two different moons that we can work with. The sun, as you can see, is 13 degrees of Cancer in this chart. That's going to change to 11 degrees in the next chart. So just to kind of get a brief look, and I apologize for not using Janus, and I know that for a lot of us looking at this extra wheel can get very confusing, but unfortunately I really needed my asteroids to help me with this project. So things like, I wanted to point out, so you've got Uranus on that descendant. And again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on these angles because I'm not sure how accurate they are, but I do want to point out that we do have surprises by the people, and Uranus in particular is like surprised by people. And let's be honest, we were bombed in Pearl Harbor, and as a matter of fact, I think that she even uses, my teacher, Martha Lang Westcott, might even use the World War II. I'm trying to think. She does use, she uses the current configurations as well, and I'll get to those. But right around the you've got Mars, you've got Uranus, so that kind of does work, because Uranus can be like a ticking bomb, okay? Like, it's, there's an unsettledness, and it's really interesting because one of the things, I study history with Heather Cox Richardson. One of the things that's come out in one of her lectures was the idea that 15 years prior to the Revolutionary War, everyone was so excited to be part of England. Uranus tells you that when things change, it changes suddenly. And then it tells you that it can be sudden aggression or a sudden warlike movement. And, I hate to say it, but in this country, I think we have experienced that. Even with regards to what's going on presently with the January 6th insurrection, coup attempt on our government. Okay? So here again, those kinds of things, we want to say they're un-American, but are they really un-American? So something to consider. Now, again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. I want to grab my notes because I really want to get to the chart comparisons of particularly, and I have paperwork for that for you guys to look at. Okay, so here we go. This is my first page of notes. I apologize. I've got so much information here. Okay, so what happens is that when you're dealing with this particular chart, and I do want to start with this one, you've got the moon. Okay, let me get rid of some of this stuff here. You've got the, and by the way, it's all valid to this lecture. The moon here at 27 degrees is conjunct Pallas. And I just want to point this out because we're going to see this a lot. We're going to see it a lot in the lunar returns that we're doing for right now. You're going to see it a lot in the charts. This one highlights it right away. Politics plays such a huge role in our people, our democracy, if you will. And it's interesting because this chart, which is the Sibley Chart, gives the politics to the people, which is what democracy is about. Okay? So democracy is about governing from the people. The people govern. The people have a say. The people are instrumental in the politics. They are. Okay? So here it is. Very close conjunction to the Sibley Chart moon. To me, a very important statement in what we are trying to send as a message to the rest of the world. And we always have since 1776. Okay? So I thought that was really something to really look at. Now, just because I can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to the dial. So give me a moment here. Okay. I'm really taking my time because there's so much information here. I do want to point out that the moon in this particular chart equals Pythia. And we know that Pallas already conjuncts that moon, but Pythia is an intuition where it's off. So you know what's going on, you're very intuitive, but the end result could still be a surprise because it won't go exactly as you've planned. And I think that we can say that that is a very true statement in many ways. Okay. Now, I also looked at this Adamito Saturn, which equals our moon, which means that we really do and will have a lot of obstacles along the way. And I think that that's very true. I think we faced one a year ago called January 6th. We faced one when Trump refused to extend the a peaceful exchange of power. So we do have that. We wanted to put that in there. So, which again is not something we thought would happen. Now, the other thing I want to do while I'm here is you notice that that's the moon. We got the sun a little bit. So I'm going to move it to the sun now. So as I am back, I just want to point out a couple of things. You know, midheaven ascendant equaling sun is like a calling. So in many respects, there is a calling that is occurring that people really feel the need to do this. And I also like that Cassandra is down here and Letitia's, and Letitia's is not far. Cassandra's a lot closer, but Letitia's is to change direction. And at the time that this chart was being put together, they were changing directions. They were changing the kind of government they wanted and how they were being governed. The Cassandra is known as advice. What I'm doing right here is Cassandra. And so my feeling is that there was a lot of dialogue between knowledgeable men. And I say men because I don't even want to talk about it, but there weren't any women involved, nor were there people of color. But the men that were there were really looking at advice that was given. And so that's a really cool thing. Now, this particular chart, again, to me, really it does seem like a really good chart. Okay. And I really particularly like, and we'll go back to it. Let's do that right now. I particularly like when I look at things like our Sagittarian ascendant, and particularly our descendant, okay, where we have academia and justice. It's like we can be more just with the more that we learned, okay? I'm going through my asteroids now for those people who are really interested in that. And a lot of things that we do is, as I pointed out before, sudden and aggressive because of the Uranus-Mars. But you're also looking at all of this where, you know, it is about going off on our own. Here we've got this Proserpina. And I'm going to be honest with you, Proserpina and Persephone are very, very strong in both charts. But they're even stronger in the second chart. So I wanted to point that out, which I'll go through in a minute. But this is a really good chart because it does really bring up a lot of the reasons why we left, or the going off on our own, or we're justified in going off on our own. And it's the memory of things that had gone on probably in that 10-year period, because remember, 15 years prior, we were real excited about this. So that's real interesting. Here's some other really interesting things. You see Apollonia here with chaos. And one of the things that I've learned about our country, and this is something that through listening to Heather Cox Richardson, but also through my own experiences, been here on the earth plane for a little while, that when it comes to businesses, which is about the money part, there really is a tendency to create chaos. That for some reason, even during this Revolutionary War, there's a consideration that we're going to create a lot of chaos here for our business. And we're going to start it now. Here we go again. Here we go again. Our own country. Here we go again is on an angle, and so is Proserpina. So one of the ways in which astrologers such as myself, who work a lot with the asteroids, read them is that whether or not they're an aspect. So we've got a 29-degree Apollonia here. We got a 1-degree Sisyphus here, okay? They're both very much an aspect at the midheaven of the Sibley chart. However, they don't really have a whole lot to do with this 14-degree Gemini Proserpina, but yet they have everything to do with it, because this chart does give us a real ascendant, and I'm going to use it because I have one. And with that said, we've got Apollonia at the midheaven, and it is squaring Proserpina here at the descendant. Okay? That is what was going on then. And because I don't, in honor of not spending a whole lot of time on a chart, and I could stay on this chart for a long time, but I just wanted to pick out some of the things that were in my notes that are more obvious. Okay? Now, in this particular, because of the palace and because of all of this, one of the things that did show up, and I do have it in my notes, is, oh, here it is. Okay, look at Jupiter with Venus, okay? Look at that, right in his 7th house. So it does mean that one of the ways in which we benefit through the Sibley chart is through our allies. And it's really interesting because as soon as Biden got in, that's the first thing he did. So I do want to point that out. I thought that was really interesting. The Jupiter stuff in here. There's also, there's a Jupiter Apollon in this. Now, I got to have to go to a dial for that. Okay. So here's where the numbers are for this chart. Okay. This chart actually doesn't have that. The numbers for this chart, let me find it, are 13. Oh, see, this is where I have to go through all my notes. It's 13. I have all this stuff written down, but the problem is I have 8 pages of notes. So I do want to talk about 13 degree. These are the moons. Here it is. Okay. That's where it is. Okay. So I had, so if you've got the 13 degree Cancer sun, okay, then your next point is down here. And here's the other point I wanted to show. Down here within a degree, because you would be using the 5, okay? But in here at 4, you have, which I think is really great, you actually have another political asteroid. You see how politics is huge in these astrology charts. You think of Pallas and Minerva as strategies. They are strategy and planning. Okay, they are. But they're also telling people what they want to hear. There's a political concept involved in both of these asteroids that is very strongly presented in this Sibley chart. You know, the other thing is that the Vulcan, this is Vulcanus, which is a trans-Neptunian, and it isn't going to change its spot very much, but in this particular chart, Vulcanus, which makes that sun stronger, is actually in the sun's axis. So there's a strength on that sun, okay? Just to bring that up, because this is one of the numbers. And then the other point was over here and about there. So we want to go way, there it is. So that, see how it pulls that in. But look, wait a minute, my numbers are off because the node, hold on a minute, I did something wrong. So we've got 13 there. Then we have, there it is. It's actually right here. I already did it. Yeah, that's it. And then it would equal, and that is correct. But then that would be, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I see. That's just a midpoint, because really it is over here. Woo! Got me a little confused there for a minute. It's right here, actually. There it is. Nope. Right there. Okay. So look how close it is to Mars. That's what I was trying to get at. So one of the things about this chart is not only is Vulcanus could be there, but so could the, see how close they are? What I'm trying to get at is Mars and Vulcanus share energies, okay? They're only a few degrees apart here, 2 degrees. And by the way, astrologers will literally go 2.5 degrees on certain things. Now, on the dial, I like to stay within a degree. But what do you do when the 2 things come up and you're at the very least going to have a midpoint within that degree? So Vulcanus and Mars are both, now Mars, I think of Vulcanus as having a lot more brain. So think of anger, and when you really lose your temper, you're not thinking, right? Okay. But Vulcanus is like having a temper, but having all of the brain behind it. it strengthens it, you see. So that is why we always see ourselves as such a strong country, even if we're not. Okay, which I always thought was interesting growing up. People say, we're the greatest country in the world. Well, how do you know? Have you ever been anywhere else? So I always questioned that, because you would hear that from the most obvious people that had obviously never lived outside of their neighborhood. Okay, at least back in those days, people didn't travel even around the country. So to hear that statement always confused me. And now that I'm older, I already know that that's really not true. Okay, so it depends what category you're talking about. And no, we're not the greatest country always. We have a lot of work to do. But with that sun Volcanus and that sun Mars, or the sun equals Volcanus Mars, which is another way to look at this, would be that we would think we're strong, and we have the capability of really working toward that kind of position. Okay, so now that's an interesting chart, but I'm going to show you one that is equally as interesting. I'm back. So here is the next chart. Okay, and remember that the Sun and Venus were close in the 7th house of that last chart. Look at this. They're even closer. Now, they are the midheaven because we used a noon chart. But the midheaven not only puts the sun on the midheaven, which we know that noontime charts do, but puts Jupiter there, puts Venus there. They're all in aspect. And it squares Saturn. Okay? And it's interesting because the July 2nd chart, which is what this is, and I do have it marked as a Sibley, but it's really not. It's the Nick Champion. So if you're taking notes, please note that this is the Nick Champion chart. And it has a Libra rising, and the Saturn, which is in Libra, is square, okay? And Saturn is our structures. It's our task maker. It is, it's our maturity factor. And it's also our ability to do a lot of work. And one of the things that I have learned, and again, this is something that I think is really important to this chart, that as Americans, and I know because as an astrologer, this is actually something I complain about. We work too much, America. In America, we put so much emphasis on our work and our task at hand that we often lose sight of all the other things that are going on in the greater world. In other words, while growing up, I felt, it's funny because I heard Heather Cox Richardson say it, and I won't even say about what time period, but she says it about the same time period. I felt people were asleep. I said, oh my goodness, do we not know what's going on out there? Are people really sleeping? And they were working. What happens with us in America is that we put our goal in front of us, and then we strive for it as if it were the most important thing about being alive. And it's not. It's something that I have felt in my practice as an astrologer. I've had to remind numerous clients of throughout the years that they were not here to work, that work was not the be-all, end-all of why we're here. Yet here in America, if you use the July 2nd chart, you would distinctly get the impression that we are worker bees and that we put our nose to the grindstone. It also means that there's a lot of importance on structure in this country. And it was really interesting because when the early founders or framers, I forget what they're called, forgive me, but those people were all about setting up different. We have an executive branch, which is not to be influenced by the Senate Congress branch, not to be influencing the DOJ, the judicial branch. So you have three the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And these are three separate Saturns. They're three separate structures. So this chart doesn't even have a true house system. And yet it's incredibly accurate because that is how this works. Okay, so let me move on. Oh, I have so many notes. Oh, it's terrible. So many notes. Okay, let me put you. Okay, so I've got my notes. I just want to apologize. I have over 10 pages of notes, 5 of which I'm going to offer up at the second part of this so that you can literally take notes from my notes if you'd like. But I want to talk about a few things. First of all, I want to talk about the conjunctions of the moon here, which there are many, okay? It's my first right here. So there's 2 pages just for this section. So here we have, look at this. We have a moon conjunct Pluto. Now remember that we are having a Pluto conjunction, which is the final in this series. I was actually hoping to do that instead of this one, but then this came up and I thought, I better look at this too, because our politics is rather complicated. Every country's is. But here we have Kronos, we have Cupido, we have the moon, and we have Pluto, all conjuncting one another. And they are conjuncting one another. You've got the Cupido moon, the importance of the family, the importance of belonging, the organizations, the authorities of the family. And in this case, again, white men ruled everything. So the authority of the family would have been, again, the father. But it's also referring to the fact that we, the people, have chosen our own authority from our own family, our own countrymen, George Washington. So the whole idea is that they wanted to be their own authority and they wanted to be their own government. And it was through Pluto. A lot of power struggle. Now it is retrograde, but Pluto's still a lot of power struggle. There was an incredible amount of power struggles going on at that point. Not just enough to draw us into war. And look at this, just to kind of reiterate, Zeus's guns, explosions, bombs. I don't know that they had bombs. I don't know because, again, that's a historical factor, and I don't know that. But I can tell you that Zeus is explosive. I can tell you that explosives reacted in a way that was really difficult, but it also represent a turning point, which is not in aspect on this. The turning point would be Chiron. Chiron is in Aries during this chart. Here's an irony. Chiron's back in Aries as we go through what we're going through right now. I do want to point that out. So Melpomene tells you that, as we're going through this turning point, it's because things have gotten worse for these people. That's what they think. And I do believe that the Zeus and the Pythia together indicate that this was not how England expected us to react. That they knew there was a problem, but maybe that this wasn't what they thought was going to happen. Maybe they didn't think they would lose. I'm not quite sure how we could look at that Pythia. We could probably look at it in 1,000 ways. Maybe, we did things that were unexpected. Maybe they did. Maybe both. So again, I'm not a historian. I love studying history, and, maybe one day I'll try to combine these factors because it does seem like the older I get, the more interested I am. The other thing I want to point out in this chart is the sun Admetus, which happens to fall in the angles in this chart. And I'm just looking at my notes to be sure, but look at this, sun Admetus. Look at Admetus here as it squares the ascendant and the descendant. Okay, so that July 2nd chart really does bode well. Okay. It really works. Okay. Adamitas is telling us that we have to go to the bottom of the matter, that we resist, that we delay. Now, what's interesting is there's a 2-day delay on this chart to the next. And the first thing we see is a delay. Now, an Adamita sun is a very enduring sun. I actually know an Adamitas. Actually, I think he's an Adamitas ascendant, but or an Adamitas sun. I think I've known them both in my lifetime. And they tend to be very rock-like people, and they know how to resist. And resistor pattern, by the way, is a movement pattern. I actually studied movement science when I was in college back a long time ago. But, and that person, actually both people I'm talking about were heavy resistor patterns. Now, the other thing I really like about this is that Poseidon is running with this sun, and that gives a little bit of enlightenment. And I do think that when they were framing this, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, that they were trying to be more enlightened and futuristic, because all men are created equal. All men are created equal. That's why people come here of all colors, shapes, sizes. And it's now stretched to all people are created equal, and all people have a right to pursue happiness. And that started in this chart, which is 2 days older than the Sibley chart. So I did want to talk about that. Now, there's something else here, and I did a lot of, the midpoints and everything, but I don't want to waste time going through everything. I'm just trying to do some of the highlights so that you can understand how astrologers work. This thing I've been working on for a couple weeks, so it's not that easy. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to point out before I move on was, remember I talked a lot about in the last chart. Let me pull that up just one more time for a second. So here we have, remember this where the Volcanus was, okay? So Volcanus is not by itself. Volcanus is actually running with the black moon Lilith, okay? And what that means is that, and what's really interesting, and if you ever get a chance, and I can't remember her name, but she does work with somebody online. She does who people were in their past, okay, past lives, if you believe in that sort of thing. I do. I can't think we could possibly think that we could be a part of God in only one lifetime. I mean, that's wow. But, I believe in it. And one of the things that Black Moon Lilith represents, and we're just going to call her Lilith just to expedite things. This Lilith represents our past and how we keep getting pulled back to it. And one of the things that really comes to my attention, particularly with the insurrection that happened last year, but even as I think about Kent State, which I know some of you guys watching this have no idea what that is. That was actually a protest that happened during the time of Nixon. I happen to have been a little girl, very vulnerable to remembering these things. And they killed 4 students. They killed them. They killed protesters and had the gall to call them thugs. And which is one of the reasons why Nixon had to start pulling in. This is where some of the right-wing craziness started. It exponentially got worse under Reagan, but it really started here with Nixon. And when you see this black moon that's so close to Mars, that's running with Volcanus, you get the idea of people being pulled back because of the opportunity to be, I want to say a bully, but a strong man. But remember that Mars isn't far away, and Mars doesn't have a lot of brains. So I definitely wanted to talk about that. I have a note on it and I wanted to talk about it. So when I look at these two charts, I don't really have a preference. I think they both work. I think that one of the things I want to do, hold on a minute. Okay, I wanted to show this. If we go to 9 degrees, okay, so we're going to 9 degrees. Now look at this, at 8 degrees and 9 degrees, I know you can see this. There's a lot of stuff, okay, a lot of stuff. Now, of course, we have an ascendant there, but we've got Shiva for reconstructing or destruction before or withdrawing or, so there's a lot of things. We've got that. We've got over here, we've got, it's not far from Hygeia, but it also, here we go with me not having notes again. All right, these are the lunar returns. So I don't need those. Here's what I do need. Okay, so when I'm doing a chart comparison, and I go into these charts, and I do this, I really went particularly with the moons. Okay, so on the 2nd, we're looking at a moon that's in Capricorn, not far from, of course, and there's Mercury. So there's this stellium of things that are happening with that moon. But that moon also equals justice. There it is right there. That's Tiffany. Okay, so I wanted to bring that up. Now, it also includes a bunch of other things. And this is the 2nd. This is for the moon axis of the 2nd. Okay, it also holds money, karma, justice, veracities. I'll get back to what this is. Hebe, Mercury retrograde, Morden, Industria, Credo for credibility, Champion, House, 3 minutes outside of Cupido, and Child. Okay, so you're saying to yourself, all right, what does that mean, Colleen? Okay, so on the 2nd, we're highlighting the idea of serving, of being of service to the people, the moon. Hebe to the moon. However, there could be codependency issues with Hebe as well. And one of the issues that our government is always worried about is the people that take advantage of the system. Honestly, I don't think it's as many as they'd like to think it is, but veracities is the lies we tell ourselves that we believe because we think it's going to make us happy. This is where I go back to the same chart that has Saturn on the ascendant. We just believe that if we put our nose to the grindstone, that we're going to make money, be able to take care of ourselves and all of our, there's it's not a Cirrus, it's the other mother. I'm so bad. When you're lecturing, it happens to everybody. It's the Cirrus, it's the other Cirrus, Demeter. Okay, so Demeter is here with Mercury, and Demeter is about meals, food. We are a country with a lot of food. It is hard to believe that anybody would go hungry here. I live in an agricultural area, though, so I guess it's easier for me to see. I think out west it might be a little different, but huge amount of people, growing their own foods. Still, we do. So then you have Mercury, which is young people, children, the news. It is retrograde. Now, one of the things that we've always talked about is we have this very strong press in the United States. As a retrograde, really? Because I don't feel like our press is very strong right now at all. I feel like it's canned. I think that you have to go to the internet to really look for news. And you have to really discern what you listen to, because if you even watch cable network television, it's very biased. So Mercury retrograde is wreaking havoc with our news. So I don't really think, those people who used to say our news is strong. I don't know that I agree with that. Morden tells us that, we will go through a lot of bad stuff. as people. We'll go through a lot of bad stuff because of money. We'll go through bad stuff because of karma. We'll go through bad stuff because of the lies we tell ourselves that we need this to make us happy. We don't. Okay? That's in the chart. Champion is that we also believe in the champions. We are, we, for some reason, we're big hero worshiping type people. And I think all people are to some extent, but we are in particular. And we also will champion for our own house. And we are all about credibility, which is a lot of times happens through industria, through production, where we want to be productive. Child goes back to Mercury, and it's one of the things that this particular chart does highlight. But let's look at a few things here. We're dealing with a population on the earth that is just over the top. We're running out of resources. We're running out of things. Of course, they want us all to have babies. They're not going to give you any money to help you raise them. And God knows it takes a lot. I've raised one. It's all I could afford. And, when you look at child here and you see about Baracises, you also get the impression that somebody's telling you that you need to have children in order to be happy. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. So here we go. Now, this is all the second. I'm going to get to the other in a minute, okay? Now, that sun also features that, as I said, Pythia, Minerva, Pallas. So that means it's also political, that, we intuitively can follow along, but are we ultimately going to know what comes along? Because Minerva equals how much is our politics bullying us? Because Volcanus is a lot of pressure. How much pressure is politics putting on us? Well, that July 2nd chart says quite a bit. Also, we're surprised by the amount of sadness. We're surprised by the fact that we changed directions. Both parties have completely changed since the beginning of this country. That's why studying true history is really, really important. Because unless we don't recognize our own history, unless we get our history, we are going to repeat it because the parties have already switched places. You now have Republicans who are against equality and Democrats that are pushing for equality. It's a bizarre world, okay? But it's in the second chart. It says that we find victory through becoming awake, by being awake, by listening, Cassandra. The problem is we don't listen. That does affect our ability to be awake, or once we become awake, we go a different direction. Okay? So it's talking about beginnings. We're so big on beginnings. It also refers to us as antisocial. And I thought this was really interesting because it showed up in both charts. And it talks about going about things backwards, doing things in pieces, and being antisocial. I think that's really interesting because here we go with, we think we're the greatest country in the world. Does that mean that we think we're better than everybody else? And would that make us antisocial? Wow. Varda also shows up in the sun axis. And Varda means that the truth will set you free. That it is the understanding of truth and all that is truth that ultimately will shine the light on us. And remember that this sun runs with Poseidon. So, just slightly off. So that's a really, really good look at that particular chart. Okay, so I'm back and I switched up the charts. I'm going to start I'm going to actually finish up with the comparison of the sun moon, just like I did in the last one. But what I'd like to do then is I'm going to do another video for the lunar returns. So this will be a part 1, and then the next one will be a part 2, just because I don't want them to get too long. And I knew I had way too much work here. Okay, so I'm now looking at, and we're going to look at the sun axis of this chart, which is, as we remember, 13 degrees. There we go. Okay, so we're going to put it in the sun axis. And and it's our calling, and this is the 4th. And, one of the things that my teacher pointed out right now is that in a present day, and we'll get to this when I get to the, was the lie squaring Melopine, both at 16 degrees, which is literally only 3 degrees from this sun. There's lie and Melopine about how things have gotten really, really bad because of a lie. We know that's true. So I'm going to be looking at the sun axis now, and truth is huge again. Lee is telling us that the web, and it's interesting because remember, these charts were done long before we had the web, okay? But the web is important, and it talks about changing of directions, just like the other one did. It talks about being awake. It talks about Rosetta truth. The other one was Barda truth, but a truth, again, that sets you free. It also has Cassandra, and one of the things that this one has, in addition to the Mars, because it also has Mars, doesn't really have the Vulcanus, but it does have the Mars. It talks about what's called, I call Patsy Alicia. What that means is Patsy is the willing victim. And if we are willing victims, we will tend to be made fools out of. And that is big in this particular chart. It also brings up, again, that we're antisocial. It brings up Poseidon. Remember, the other one was conjunct the trans-Neptunian Poseidon. This one has Poseidon, the asteroid, in there, and it talks about how we're risk takers. Although it is retrograde, we are a country of people that would take risks, okay? Very similar to the other chart, which I already talked about, where we had Pythia but one of the things, and I forgot to bring this up, is that I did talk about karma, but it also has destined and hubris. In other words, there is a lot of karma in the formation of this country. So it's interesting that we are a country founded on a degree of karma. Like, in other words, it was really meant to be, and there's a karmic fulfillment through the beginning of this country, and there is a Victoria in the second chart, not as much in this chart. So as I go on and I look at and I don't want to get into the lunar returns. I'm going to save these. Okay. There we go. Okay, so here's a couple of factors that I picked up. So I'm going to go back to, actually, I might have the paperwork. Okay, I'm having a real problem getting my paper to show. There it is. Okay, so here's a chart comparison, and this is the second when I did the moon, and then this is the second where I am doing the moon, I'm sorry, the fourth, the 27 degree Aquarius moon, okay? So here, the reason why all of this seems familiar, and it's like I'm going through the same asteroids as the sun is actually in the axis. So we have a sun-moon axis for the Sibley chart, which might be one of the reasons why so many of us astrologers really like it, okay? So a lot of things I said about the sun, the palace, the influence of politics. Here we go. The surprises. All of the stuff that I talked about is also in the sun axis, which I just read off to you. So it makes that doubly, and that emphasis doubly strong. Okay? Here's our new beginnings. Here's us being antisocial. Berlin is talking about things kind of going backwards. And Isis, which is retrograde, is in pieces. So I'm just kind of running through. Varda is a truth. So there's the Varda, okay? But all of that is also in the sun axis. So I just really wanted to just bring that up and talk about that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a few other things that also come into play. Here we are. This is the problem with too many notes. Okay. I'm not going to talk extensively about this, but let me come back. And sorry about that. There we are. Now I'm back. And I did that while you were on because I didn't want to keep putting it on pause. Pluto is in the second house of the Sibley chart. And what that means is that we have driving ambition to acquire money and material resources. Now, you already know that there's a sun axis, industrial, which will also cause that. Pluto in the fourth house, which is where it is in the July 2nd chart, is a chart that's where we have there's a strong desire to be a master of one's home and domestic theme, creating a dominating attitude within the home, okay? It's about power struggles that can be highlighted with Pluto in general. So the fourth house represents your home, where you come from, your roots, if you will. And having Pluto there is rather interesting. So that's where it would be in the second. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that I'm not really going to put a lot of importance on the houses because the times could be in question. But I just thought it was really interesting because I started to look at it. Here's another one. Now, this is not a house. So this is going to be more in effect. The moon in Capricorn represents reserved, cautious, cold, austere, hard workers, but they tend to have personal biases toward status and financial security. They actively seek power and status. Okay, that is the second. There's a lot of people that fits. Okay. Now, if you go with the Aquarian moon, Sibley chart, because the other one was Nick Champion, that's a Capricorn moon. Sympathize with the needs of humanity. There's flashes of intuition. It's friendly in an impersonal way, seeks freedom of emotional expression, and demands freedom of such. In other words, you have to be free to feel the way that you do and demand that freedom. I think both moons sound like us, so it's really hard for me. Again, I don't have an opinion. I'm hoping you do, okay? Here's a couple more. It's about, I'm going to do the Capricorn one, Pluto, Chronos, Cupido, and the moon. It's developing a government, the form of a government, the rebuilding of a state. So you see that Capricorn moon really fits. Great changes in the family or government. Yes, it was. Reactionary measures, traditions reinstated or reinstituted by the government. This is incredible because this is all very accurate to the July 2nd chart. Social changes that are reforming to develop social reforms and social manners. Great changes and transformations. A constantly changing government and public conditions. Wow! That is so accurate. And that is July 2nd. not July 4th. So I would love to hear from you guys. What I'm going to do in the next series is, well, first of all, let me point out two things that Martha did. And then I'm going to go and talk about, I'm going to get off of here, start another video and use the same two charts and do lunar returns on them. Okay? So in Martha's comparison, this was in her newsletter for, I believe it's January, but oh, here we go. It is, yep, January. There it is. Okay. Martha talks about how that 16 degrees, 58 minutes is Melopine, and it's squaring lies. And we already talked about that one. Another one is that we don't know enough about something that's causing death. Calypso says there's missing information. And you see Orpheus. And this equals business, Apollon. So it's telling us businesses are dying, but it's also telling us because of what we don't know, because not everything is known, a lot of people, Apollon, are dying. It's very accurate, okay? It talks about how, and that's Clotho, which came to Orpheus of the original chart. The other one is Odysseus has now come to Melpomene. And Odysseus is your immigrants. And it's really bad. Okay, that, you know, it's gotten really bad with immigrants. And it has, okay. But the other thing I really liked is that Poseidon conjuncts lie right now. So there's a lot of stuff in the media that's lying. Remember me talking about the press, retrograde Mercury? Why do they think our press is strong? I'm not sure. Okay, so anyway, my moment of gratitude is that I want to thank you for watching this video. I want to thank all of my subscribers who have been really faithfully helping me to build this channel. Thank you so much. If you're not a subscriber, I hope you'll consider becoming one. With that said, please like, share, comment. I'd love to hear from you. But that's where I'm going to end part 1 of Sibley versus Nick Champion. Be prepared for part 2, which will be lunar returns from both charts, because hindsight is always 20/20. Talk to you soon. Until we meet again, I wish you only happy readings.